Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. Today's guest is Ryan Hogan, entrepreneur, founder of a very interesting firm called Talent Harbor. Most recently from Annapolis, but relocated to Van Nuys, California, where he is pursuing this company. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, Gary.
My pleasure. Ryan, as we talked about before, I'm always interested in ideas that you look at through today's lens and say, well, that makes a lot of sense. But they don't just appear. They come from somewhere. And they usually aren't the first iteration of whatever that final idea is. We've got to go through a bit of a process to get there. And I find your journey, your path particularly interesting. Because as I understand it, you started by enlisting in the Navy 20 or so years ago. Yeah. Talk me through how we went from that to where you are now. It's got to be an interesting story.
Yeah. And you know, what you just said right there, where you talked about like this iteration and like ideas don't appear. What's been really interesting about kind of my entrepreneurship journey is I can draw a line back to third grade in Mrs. Price's class where I was selling creepy crawlers to doing what I'm doing today. And it's just been like this natural evolution. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But yes, I enlisted about 23 years ago now. Why did I enlist? Because I didn't have the grades, certainly for the academy, and I barely had grades to actually get into any institution because I was a class clown. I didn't pay attention. I cut class. I found things outside of school way more interesting than the things that were happening in school. And I had this lifelong dream. And it sounds like, Gary, both your and I's dreams were very similar because all I wanted to do was fly jets and break the sound barrier. And so when I enlisted in the Navy, I don't know if I completely put together that could have been the path because like what I needed at that point was discipline. I needed direction. I needed mentorship. There's a lot of different things that I needed, but I knew that there was at least some sort of path that could lead me to getting in the cockpit of an F-18. And so that's what I did. So I enlisted as a naval aircrewman. I flew in MH-53 Echo helicopters doing airborne mine countermeasures. I later went to the test and development squadron where they were trying to take those systems off of the gigantic 53 and put them on the Lamborghini-ish 60 Sierra. And it was at that command, I was in Pax River doing the test and development, HX-21, and I got picked up for a program called Seaman to Admiral, or Stay 21 as it's affectionately known in the Navy. And basically what it is it finds compelling humans in the enlisted ranks that they think deserve a shot at becoming an officer. And so I got picked up for that. You get to pick any NRTC-based program across the country. I chose University of Maryland, which was a crosstown affiliate of George Washington University. So I went to GW's NRTC program, and for 3 years I studied business at the University of Maryland. What's interesting is I actually lost my pilot spot. And so one of the things you and I were talking about earlier was this idea of all the ships that I've been on. And it's because I became a surface warfare officer. There's a longer story in there. I won't bore you with all of the details, but back to the entrepreneurship journey, I was always starting businesses. And I actually had the first one that took off while I was going to the University of Maryland. So while everybody else is showing up to business school and putting together marketing plans for fictitious businesses, I was grabbing a tiger by the tail with this business that had just taken off, and it was a zombie-infested 5K obstacle course race, and it was incredible. But I'll pause there for just a second because the story's long, and I think there's a lot of interesting things we could touch on.
Well, I can't pass that one by. A 5K, it's a race. Zombies are involved. You got to help me
So,
with more.
and this gets back to the iteration because one of the companies that I launched was this company called WarWear. So when I was in Pax River doing test and development, when you're on shore duty in the Navy, you have some extra capacity. Sea duty, you are working 18 hours a day. Shore duty, that's kind of your relief valve for all the things that you did. And with that capacity, I launched a company called WarWear, which was basically an Under Armour knockoff, but it was tailored towards the needs of tomorrow's warfighters. I don't know. There was some kind of thing in there. And that was my first real lesson in like, if you build it, they don't come. Because I had ordered over $100,000 worth of t-shirts thinking that they were just going to fly off the shelves, and they didn't. They stayed in boxes in our garage. And so we had hundreds of thousands of dollars of t-shirts sitting in a two-car garage in Pax River, Maryland, and no way to move them. So I opened up a magazine. It was a Men's Health, and they had this advertisement for Warrior Dash. And so I knew how much it costs to have an advertisement in Men's Health because I had just called a couple weeks earlier with WarWear. It was over $100,000. And so I was like, well, if this company Warrior Dash can afford to advertise in this magazine, then like there's a real opportunity. So I called my best friend from childhood and I was like, let's start an obstacle race because I need to get rid of all of these t-shirts. And if we start this company can buy the t-shirts from this company and then give them to the participants. And that's what we did. So we just put a twist on it. We developed the name Run for Your Lives. We were like, maybe there's zombies involved in this because this is like the Walking Dead. And we developed the system. So we had flag football belts. There was 3 flags. Everything was thematic and immersive. And so if you got through the course with at least 1 flag belt remaining through all the zombies, then you got through alive.
Who played the zombies?
First, it was volunteers. And so we had to have 750 zombies. And because of that, it was 3 shifts of 250. So we needed 750 volunteers everywhere we went. And we would put them through like world-class makeup and blood and design and all the interesting stuff. We got so many volunteers for this that one of the guys that we were working with, he was like, hey, what if we started charging for zombies? We were like, that's stupid. People aren't going to pay us to work at our event. Nope. We put a $40 price point on it and we sold out every single location we went to. That was the first
Let me get
ticket.
this straight. People were paying you to help you make money at your event.
That's correct. That's correct. And
Got it.
we were also part of this entrepreneurship competition with Kevin Plank, who's the founder and CEO of
Right.
Under Armour. And we won the competition. And one of the things that I said during that, it was like, they called it the Cupid's Cup, but it was like Shark's Tank for the University of Maryland Business School. And I used that line. I was like, people are paying us to work at our event, and someone was recording it. It went on YouTube, and so we took a lot of heat over about a
Yeah.
year for saying that. But that was the truth.
To so you're running the events where? Locally, or are you moving the events around? Or how's that working?
So we did the first one, and we're like, yeah, we'll have a few thousand people to show up. I've got a few thousand shirts. This will be great. Well, the first event, we had 12,700 people that showed up, and
How does how does that happen? How do you
yeah,
advertise? How does it go viral like that? I mean, that's extraordinary.
you when there's something that's unique, it creates a compelling talking point for other people. So when we launched this, there has since then there has been other zombie races, but when this launched, there was nothing like it. And so what was interesting was I was like, Derek, what if I called a local radio station? So DC 101. It was I forget the guy's name. Oh God. Anyhow, he's well-known radio show. Every Friday he does this like, hey, if you've got something weird, call me up. And so I was like, hey, I'm gonna pretend to be someone that just discovered this event and get on the show. So I called, they picked up. I was like, I just found a zombie event. I think it'd be a really cool conversation. They were like, oh
Nice.
yeah, stand by. 5 minutes later, I'm on the show and I'm like, I just
Wow.
stumbled on this website. It's a zombie event. Boom, blew up. Everybody started talking about it, and we sold out our first event.
That's amazing. That's a great story. Because it goes from a concept that didn't work. If you build it, they don't come. And it's like, let's latch something onto it because we're not going to do any worse than we are right now. And all of a sudden it's
Yes,
like, wow,
that's it.
that's wild.
That's
That's a great story. That so I assume that business was profitable for you?
no, no, not at all. So here's the interesting part about we didn't know anything. I'm probably mid 20s at this point. And like when I
Yep.
say lifelong entrepreneur, what I mean by that is nothing ever actually took off, but like, buying this and selling this just kind of came natural to me. When this event took off, no idea what we were doing. So like
Hmm.
I couldn't even spell profit and loss statement. We hired all of our best friends, which had no business being in operations and putting together an event. The
Right.
first event we made $732,000, and when we netted everything out, we spent or invested 1.1 million to put it on because Derek and I have big visions. And so, what did we have at this event? We have like a professional wrestler. I don't know why. We had 18 bands that showed up. We had fireworks. When you get fireworks, I'm just thinking, hey, we hire the fireworks people. No, we needed the whole fire department to come through. We needed permits. So, anyhow, we went a little overboard.
This is great.
And we started to figure it out in subsequent years. The problem is by the time we figured it out, it was too late. So we went
Yeah.
from one event to 13 events to 22 events in our third year across the United States. In the third year, everything started to taper off. We were doing advertising on The Walking Dead, but we just couldn't figure out profitability, burned a lot of cash, and unfortunately went bankrupt.
Okay.
And
Um,
that's like to your point of we did just get into it. So here it is.
yeah.
Like that's why I didn't become a pilot because the stresses and the pressure of when everybody sees bankruptcy, they're like, oh, that must be like terrible and hard. By the time somebody gets to bankruptcy, a company, an individual, it is the most kind of relieving moment in there because what people don't see is the 12 to 18 months of just pure chaos of trying
Yeah.
to turn things around.
Yep.
And so stress, anxiety, everything else. I went to talk to somebody, a counselor at Bethesda. It got on my medical record, went for my pre-commissioning flight physical, nammy whammy, became a SWO, shipped out to San Diego.
Yeah. Understandable.
Yep.
Um, you bring up a lot of really interesting points. I was lucky enough to talk to the CEO of Lovesac recently, furniture company, Sean Nelson. Same thing. Had a great idea. It was a great idea. Expanded way too fast. Too many retail stores, and just like a shooting flare, up it died. And he said, the lowest point in his life was him going into these retail stores he'd opened with 20 people and $2 million and with a sawzall and having to take down all the fixtures.
Yep.
The company went through bankruptcy and reorganization, and it's now, I think one of the coolest companies out there for sustainable furniture. But he's had a similar story. I mean, you really do learn. The stress is unbelievable during the learning curve, and you hope that your experience is matched with reflection in real time. But unfortunately, I think that's more of a maturation issue when you can actually develop wisdom in real time. Clearly, you've developed that at this point because you've had the ability to think back over what that journey looked like. So we come out of that. We're now
Mhm.
on a variety of different assignments in the Navy. How long were you active duty in the Navy, Ryan?
15 years. So I separated from active in 2017.
Okay. Now you're still in the reserves as an officer?
Yes.
Good for
Yep.
you. Excellent.
Thanks.
So when you're not doing that, tell me how Talon Harbor came about. How did we get into recruiting from there?
Yeah, so we went from the hardest thing to do that I found in business is find product market fit. And you talked a little bit about this evolution, this journey, and like what you think about in the beginning, what you envision, like takes shape in a completely different form. And I think the people that are most successful in entrepreneurship are able to let go of their idea very quickly and follow the market signals, follow the feedback that they're getting, and iterate as fast as possible. So I dabbled in a couple other things after Run for Your Lives. The next one that took off was something called Hunt a Killer, and it was an immersive murder mystery experience. It still is. I started that in 2016. That's what actually was facilitated the opportunity to transition into the reserves. We grew Hunt a Killer, which we went from zombie events to murder mystery experiences. We started the same way. We brought a whole bunch of people to us. we realized very quickly that didn't scale. Like Run for Your Lives, we could put 10, 15,000 people through a course over a weekend. With this, you couldn't have 1,000 people standing around a fake crime scene trying to investigate. So we said, well, we found product market fit, but we haven't found the right model yet. So we backed into a subscription box model. We started shipping that out each month episodically, 6 episodes in a season. We grew that business from 0 to about 55 million bucks in 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And like we made all new mistakes, but we didn't make very many mistakes from 0 to 10 million because we had already made those mistakes with the last company. So this one, very quickly, the first thing I did when I got out of the Navy, I joined a Vistage group. During that Vistage group with a whole bunch of like peer-to-peer CEOs, we had a guest speaker come through with this thing called EOS. So Vistage implemented EOS into the business. We hired the right people. We eventually got into retail distribution, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, and I sold it last year.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of like the post Run for Your Lives was Hunt to Killer, which was great. And then the most common question now is like, how do you go from zombie events to murder mystery consumer products now into recruiting? Like that's usually the most common question mark I get.
Well, I'll fine. Answer that one for me.
That's well, that one's so my Vistage chair, great guy, business coach, mentor. He came and he said, we're going through the sale process. We're about 6 months into the sale process. We've got 3 horses in the race. We know there's going to be some sort of transaction. So he said, kid, you're not going to be able to sit still. So what I want you to go do now is go pick your favorite line item, and I want you to plan to go do that for a while. For me, it was people. It was the investment, development, coaching, mentoring. It was everything people related. Loved it. But when I looked at the P&L, what I saw was $1 million spent on recruiting over that 7-year period, and that made zero sense to me.
Hmm.
I understand the importance of finding the right human. I think business fundamentally is just the organization of human and the leading of humans. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I like that's my belief. But I don't believe that 30% success fees that were developed back in the World War eras is the right business model to be pitching. And I think that historically has made the most important part of business, finding and retaining the right talent, inaccessible to small, medium-sized businesses. So when we launched Talent Harbor, the whole kind of motto was, let's make expert recruiting accessible to small, medium-sized businesses.
So, and I think it's a great idea. How do you go from that? And then as you're starting to develop this idea for small to medium-sized businesses, was there a particular business niche that you knew better than others? Did you stay focused on expanding companies that might be going through fundraising rounds? Did you focus on particularly well-established companies? How did you kind of, I guess, gain the domain knowledge to know A, how to find these people, and B, how to convince them to look at a new opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question for a variety of reasons. Looking back on it now, there's the possibility that if like I would have focused to where my network was already established, we might have had an easier time getting off the ground. By easier, I mean faster, more efficient, more effective. Um, here's one secret. I am not a recruiter. I am not a murder mystery game designer. I'm not a zombie race course designer. Like what
Mhm.
I do is I find opportunities. I think my superpower is not the execution or operations of these ideas. It's being able to spot opportunities and very quickly drive an organization to establish and find product market fit.
Okay.
Usually when I stay in from past that point, I typically screw stuff up, especially if I don't have the right team around me. And so the reality is I have partnered with a world-class recruiter out of Annapolis, Maryland. She was the best recruiter we ever used at Hunt to Killer. And so this was a very easy and kind of natural ask to see if she wanted to join forces. The reality is the systems, the databases, all of these things, recruiters don't really need to have a specialty. And what I mean by that, we do. But what I mean by that is back in the day when recruiters would charge 30%, it's because they would pull out a filing cabinet and they would have hundreds of resumes of manufacturing executives in the Midwest. And you'd have another recruiting shop that would have a filing cabinet full of salespeople for this industry. Or somebody would have a great network with executives. The reality today is you can find anybody anywhere. And I think the specialties really come into play with how are you going to ask the right questions and put them through your vetting process. So our specialty is sales roles. And how we kind of found our niche is because EOS has been a game-changing, just like life changer for me. And so
Mm.
it's an ecosystem that I knew that I wanted to be around. And so we have spent the last 12 to 18 months really building and solidifying amazing relationships inside of that ecosystem. And so for us, it's really just a referral business at this point, and we just do great work for amazing clients operating on EOS.
And are your clients episodic? Do they hire you to fulfill a certain need and then walk away from the subscription, or is it kind of an ongoing, repeatable revenue model?
It depends. What my main objective is, because I've lived through this experience, like I don't, one thing I dislike is contracts. I understand why contracts exist. I do. But I think if you find the right companies, the right organizations, the right people, to a certain extent, like everybody just kind of holds up their bargain. So one thing that was very important to me with Talon Harbor is there are no contracts. It's as seamless and frictionless as possible. We'll do great work for great clients. They'll continue to come back. And that's kind of the two-way promise that we have. So there is no commitment. So when someone joins, they turn it on. If we have found them a role and they have no other needs, they put it on pause. And our whole philosophy there is like, is it a leaky bucket, or is that high churn, especially compared to the consumer product space? Yeah, like it is a high churn rate. But what we have seen is clients come back. And so like I don't even classify clients going on pause as churn. What we're like is we just had a successful placement there, and this company within the next 3 to 4 months is going to have another need and they'll be back.
I would also assume that on some of the companies where you might be working with companies that are rapidly expanding, some of the folks that you found originally might be going out on their own and calling you up and saying, can you help me again?
Yeah.
uh, from the other side. Now, it's fascinating. And it must expose you to a large number of a variety of businesses where you're learning all the time. Um, when you look at everything you've done, you look at Talon Harbor, which I know is more recent. Um, when did you realize you were onto something after you launched Talon Harbor?
Hmm. That's a that's a good, because like even Talon Harbor, we went through several iterations. In what do they call it? What do they call it when you look back and like everything gets embellished or everything like looks easy? Revisionist, like a revision story. You like look back and you're like, oh, it was perfect in the way that we did it. There's not been one company or even project. Like we have a podcast called Confessions of an EOS Implementer, and the whole purpose of that podcast was to build relationships, but really get in front of ICPs. And that's what we figured. And then when we turn around a year later, it does decent. And we just realized that like all the listeners are also EOS implementers. And we're like, oh, that was completely different than what we thought it was going to be. And so it's been different with each company. I think for us, it was at about the 10-month point. And we had just really started to refine this concept of recruiting as a service. And we were always hesitant because we also had contingent. We had like the bread and butter type of recruiting and executive and stuff like that. And so we were kind of hesitant to get into this. And then eventually we picked up a client, and at that moment, like they got it, we got it, it came together, and we went all in. And maybe we went all in on it too soon when we just said we're not doing contingent or any of these other searches anymore. Um, but yeah, it's when you just start getting people talking about you and like
Okay.
like lighting up when they understand the value proposition.
So if you would describe for me what your ideal client looks like if you only had more of that type of
Yeah.
client, whatever that might be. And also, how do you search for new business? How do you hunt for new clients?
This is a very recent thing for us. So I'll give you an example. One thing that we track very closely is inbound referrals. And inbound referrals are great because the trust is transferred between the referraler and the referralee, and there's a lot of other interesting dynamics that happen. Last month alone, we had 27 referrals, inbound referrals. And so for us, it's been like it's been like, well, this is working, and so maybe we don't need to pivot. The problem with referrals is you're overly reliant on other people. And so just recently we were like, well, we need to go out and hunt our own business and kind of figure out what an outbound strategy looks like. So we did some research and we were already doing 100% sales roles. That's very big for us. So we've kind of mastered this like hunting, vetting, and onboarding for sales talent. And so we're like, great, we found a niche. This is where we're going to play. Well, we did some research about um, 3 months ago, and what we did was we looked at our current clients and we said, holy crap, these are all out of the home service space. So our clients today are HVAC, plumbing, roofing, windows, doors, floors. And it's been very interesting because I couldn't have told you this a year and a half ago that like this was going to be our target market. But that's what a great client looks like is it's really kind of a 5 to 15 million-ish home service company. And the best clients are operating on some sort of business operating system. EOS is the gorilla in the room. They own 90% plus of the market share there. But we find the best clients typically have some sort of framework internally.
Fascinating. I would assume that the folks that were referring you, you had a deeper connection with than just a service provider. There must have been some form of alignment or natural affinity between either the company or the personalities, I would assume.
I yes, 100%. And like it starts with the podcast. And so like I'll bring someone on the Confessions of an EOS Implementer. We'll have a great conversation, and then we'll just stay in touch. So every couple weeks I'll reach out or they'll reach out. And we've just found amazing humans that like believe in what we're doing. And a win for us is a win for them. And so there's a lot of trust that comes with that, like we know what we're doing. And when we do right for their clients, it makes them look better.
Everything you're saying, first of all, well done you for arriving at those conclusions. I couldn't agree with them more. As a financial advisor, you start essentially with zero, and your desperation doesn't even begin to describe it.
Hmm.
And unless you're willing to get knocked around for quite a number of years and learn what you need to learn to actually become competent, not even good, but just competent at your craft, that's why there's a 90% turnover rate. But as time goes by, what you realize is your success is not predicated on your ability to be predictive of the markets or come up with great investment ideas. Your success is predicated on your ability to surround yourself with the right clients and understand that not everyone should be your client, that you've got to have other features, other things there, because what most people don't recognize is if you're an investor, the number one goal for most investors that are wealthy already, they don't want to lose their wealth, obviously, but primarily they want to deal with an individual that understands them and their family and can help navigate them to meet their needs. Performance, even fees are pretty far down the list. So it's like a full contact business, which I think is very similar to what you're finding because you're placing people, you're actually placing investable assets, if you think about it. When you're
Yep.
placing people in a company and those individuals, especially if they're at the top of the sales funnel, whoever's hiring them is making a big bet that they're going to be able to deliver. So they're making the investment in a similar way that, almost like you would be an investment advisor, except their investment's in a human being that you found for them. So being that intermediary is not an easy thing. I get it. I think it's a really cool concept. What's next? You're going to build this and sell it, or are you going to stay with it, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you brought up earlier was you were like, I'm sure you're getting exposed to so many different things. I am. Like all I've been exposed to over the last 15 years was really the consumer space. And I will tell you, the consumer space is brutal. It is brutally hard. There are always cash flow challenges. It's all about scale and trying to predict human trends and human behaviors at scale is it's just there's so much risk with consumer. And I got into this, and we've been servicing a lot of I guess you could classify home services as consumer, but it's different. It's a necessity. It's not discretionary. And my brain keeps going to, well, why don't we start rolling up companies? So if we can figure out how to place amazing humans and we know how to operate them with EOS, like maybe what's next to us is rolling up home service businesses, something like that. But I don't know. I say for the next 12 to 18 months, like this is this is fun. Like I have control over my own time. This is business to me now, having amazing conversations with people like you, Gary. So um, right now I'm not thinking too far ahead, but I have some ideas.
Well, my only piece of advice would be this: get your pilot's license and accumulate a bunch of hours before you go invent a new business because you got to stay alive to do it. It takes some focus. Ryan, I am so glad you were able to join us today. This is really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Again, it's something I never knew about. I know our listeners never knew about it. If people have an interest in reaching out to you, because we have all sorts of different people listening to this podcast, how do they find you? How do they reach out and get in contact if they have a need for your services? What do they do?
Yeah, the easiest way is talentharbor.com/Ryan. And it's got my personal email, it's got my LinkedIn, it's got all the ways that you can contact me individually. I find that better than like sending people to email, sending people to LinkedIn. But just talentharbor.com/Ryan.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure I put all the proper links when we put the podcast up, but I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Gary. This was a blast.
My pleasure. Folks, you've been listening to If the Public Only Knew. My guest has been Ryan Hogan, serial entrepreneur and another Renaissance man. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.